Good afternoon, everybody. This is Alex Chicola outside in a sunny but cold and brisk Massachusetts day, raining from the great city of Holyoke, Massachusetts. And, well, I don't really know what I'm substantially going to say, but I think it's been on my heart for a little while to share a little bit more about my spiritual experience, if you will. For those of you that know me well, or have been intimately connected with me in work or life or whatnot, you know that I've, the last couple of years have been a wild roller coaster of a ride with ups and downs, and the last 18 months have been a crazy spiritual radical transformation. I met God ultimately as my last resort. I think a lot of us do that. What can we do, right? June 16th of 2024. My mom calls it a soft crack. My best friend Jeffrey calls it a manic episode. Whatever you want to call it. I humbled myself in the eyes of the Lord. I think we all pray, and sometimes we say that our fathers, or we God help me with this, blah 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 blah. But the posturing of our heart, I've learned, is the most critical component in my faith for me. And I want to, I just kind of want to share a little bit about my experience. It's become my favorite thing to talk about. I love sharing things I've lived or experienced with people, especially those that are hurting. I think Christianity, if you want to, label it, living in Christ, for me, and I don't know about everybody, it's worked really well through suffering. And I think when we think about the embodiment of Christ as a person, he certainly suffered. And it's nice to be able to put that on somebody else, to give that pain or that fear or that anxiety or whatever you're going through, to give it to him. So, I, for y'all that don't know me, my name's Alex. I own a real estate company. I started it back in the fall of 2015. So we're just going on our 10-year anniversary now of being in business. And the first 5 years were exciting and fun. The market was different at the time. We were growing, arguably too fast, but we were doing real estate investment deals, development deals, lots of projects in and around Boston. We went through a series of learning curves in the beginning of our career, which inspired us to become, to get my partner Harrison licensed, with his construction supervisor license, so we could oversee our own development. And as we kind of crossed over that initial series of hurdles in our company, we decided that we wanted to balance our portfolio, if you will, and have some more long-term vision investment opportunities, aka apartment buildings, as part of our business model. So right before COVID-19 shut the world down, we invested in a portfolio of multifamily housing here in Western Massachusetts. And you can call it a perfect storm if you'd like. And that's certainly what it felt like. The next, subsequent years really just felt like we were sliding down a mountain. And it was taking us out, and we were clawing and trying to, put our pickaxes in to hold on and try to climb against this shifting landscape. And we ultimately have not been able to keep up. There were, from a business perspective, there are plenty of things that we can control and do better, especially moving forward, right? You usually learn by making mistakes. That's normally where you get wisdom, from making mistakes, a lot of the time, not all the time. So the best thing about this all is that past performance is not indicative of future results in the best way. But there were some things that we could have done better and will do better in the future. There are certain things we couldn't control. For example, in the height of COVID, if you guys remember, there was a lot of supply chain issues, right? We didn't have toilet paper. In my world, plywood went from $25 a sheet to $130 a sheet. And when you're building houses, those kind of cost overruns are really challenging to absorb. But you have to, and you have to keep going forward. Or you can quit and file bankruptcy in the moment, which we did not do. And we won't go bankrupt. But over the last couple years, as the landscape changed, as the financial market changed, as interest rates went from 2.75% to 9%, all of these things had real tangible results for our company. And the best way I can kind of describe it is like a series of dominoes falling, but the wrong way. So in 2023 was, while I was living it, I certainly would say it was the worst year of my life. And I could say it probably still was the worst year of my life. But looking back, especially through 2024 and this great year of 2025, the good development happens in the dark room, right? When you put a photo to develop a photo, you put it in a dark room. And I think there might be a tangible parallel for you in your prayer life there if you're not praying in a private space. But through these horrendously hard years, I'm coming out so much stronger and fortified. And before I really broke down and I reached my wit's end, and I just cried out to God. Like I said, He was my last resort. I never lived with a God focus first, and I certainly never led with a Christ-centered focus with the intention to live in Christ. Now that I'm 18 months in, I can talk about this weird peace that is just resting on me, which if you look at my circumstances, I mean, it's been hard. Certainly I've lived it. I can tell you it's been hard. I don't think there's any real reason in living in the past or looking back. We're not going that direction. Today's a new day. Tomorrow's not promised. We have the moment that we're living in right now. And I think it's, I've learned to be present with God in the now. And I think if you do that, you won't miss out on life. There's a time for dreaming. But to be present is really important. I think that's one of the great things about some of these other Stoicism and, Buddhism and all of that, helping you reach nirvana is living in the present. And you can do that in Christ too. But, over the last couple years, as my company has backslid and my efforts have failed, June 16th, I basically threw my hands up and I was like, God, I hate this company. I do not like me. I said I hated myself because I was living in the numbers. I was living in the spreadsheets, housing have an interesting relationship with it now as a commodity. I don't know how I feel about it as much, but I do recognize its crucial need. We need more of it. And I think there's a reason why we've been drawn into housing. It's part of our calling. I think God called us while we were young and dumb. I think if, he would have said to me in my 30s, I'm 34 now, to get into it, and I would have had some of these experiences, I probably would have said, no way, Jose, not for me. But here we are, millions of dollars behind the 8 ball in the wrong direction. And we've lived, Harrison, my partner, I'm so lucky and blessed to have great people on my team, Harrison and Caleb, who have been really strong when I've been weak. But, as we live our humanity and we live our experience, we go through these seasons of depression and doubt and anxiety and fear. And, at some point you got to get through the tunnel and you say, I don't want to cry anymore. I don't want to survive anymore. I don't just want to live, I want to thrive. And that tunnel can be really, really hard to get through. And a lot of times you don't know, sometimes it feels like you're, not only are you going through a tunnel, but you're going through it on your hands and knees, and bullets are flying over you, and it's raining and it's dark and you don't know what direction to go. And some days you just need to survive, and that's okay. And I think we need to celebrate that for the people that are surviving and just trying to hold on and take it minute by minute. But there's another plane of consciousness above that. There's a liberation above that, which I won't lie to you, is very, it's much easier to talk about. It's easier said than done. But I've now been graciously given this gift. I consider it a gift, to live in Christ and to be above that. And that I believe is the freedom that people always talk about when I think when they talk about religion or Christianity or Christ in general. And I think for me, I got it through suffering and being able to throw that at his feet was a huge weight off of my shoulders. And I won't say that the weight got off of my shoulders, and now I can say it's on the ground. And my company and the commitments have still felt like a really heavy burden at times. But now, instead of feeling like I have to just pull this rock by myself, now it feels like I have Christ with me, pulling this rock with me, right? He's the ultimate rock. I do love that parallel as a builder. He's the stone that the builders rejected, right? And I think we did that not even knowingly, and now he's at the head of the table when I talk about business and I think about plans and I think about the future. I don't like to make decisions now and then ask for prayer and guidance. I like to ask for prayer and guidance before I make the decision, which I think is contrary to what most of us humans do, and that's cool, right? I'm guilty of it a million times over. But it's weird to kind of, I've been thinking about how do I express this testimony a little bit, and what's the benefit of sharing this testimony. And I guess that's not for me to really worry about. I don't have to worry about how these words are going to reach people or who they're going to connect with. But, these dark rooms, I've kind of identified some of this as like the reason for the season. And I think, work is just part of the picture, right? We all have relationships, families. I was in an intimate relationship with a woman for 6 years. And, I thought we would get married. And we didn't. And we haven't. And, that relationship ultimately the door closed on that relationship. And it was a really painful experience to go through. But what I recognize now is that, I stepped into a relationship and then asked God to come in and clean up, right? And in the beginning, the bulk of our relationship, there were a lot of things that I did wrong. There were plenty of things that I didn't necessarily always make it very easy for her. And I still hold her in the highest regard in my mind and in my spirit. I mean, she baptized me. So in my faith, it's an extremely high honor, I think. And I'm not trying to sound like a douche there. I'm just, I don't want to, I still want to speak positivity. We're all God's children at the end of the day. And regardless of the mistakes any of us make, I think it's important that we remember that. We're all God's children. And we're all flawed in some way. We all make mistakes. The world is not perfect. I know some people have a hard time with the book of Genesis and this whole Adam Eve sin thing. That's not my struggle. I don't need to fight that fight and understand it. I can believe that the world is broken and that it used to not be. And I can certainly believe that as a human, we can rebel. We're very rebellious and we live by our flesh. And I gave my relationship to God, and it was really interesting to feel like the relationship was then being pulled apart by God. And I go back to that previous thought where I don't want to make a decision and then ask God to come in and clean up. I want to, if I see something or I want something or I want to think something, I'm going to bring it to God first. I'm going to bring him into my thoughts. I mean, I commune with God a lot now, to the point to where it's like I don't live in my head alone anymore. And God's looking through my eye gates with me. So now, as I rebuild my company and I start over, I'm starting over with 10 years of experience, and I've made so many mistakes, and I know what not to do and how to do things more better, and ABC 1, 2, 3, right? And in the same way, in this relationship, it's like I'm going to do the same thing on the next one. I've never went into a relationship with Christ at the center first, and I'm going to do that moving forward. And while, if you look at my circumstances, I think most people would be like, poor guy, like, just quit. I'm too stubborn to quit. It's probably my best and worst. That's my best quality trait. We're going to rebuild, and we're going to rebuild with God. And I think it's really refreshing. It certainly feels refreshing. And there's this weird peace that just rests on me now. But I had to go through this incredible tunnel of pain. I mean, it was, 2021, 20 and 21 were hard in one way because I was dehumanizing my work because I was focused on the numbers. And then in the subsequent years after COVID, we were in restructuring efforts that failed due to market conditions. And then in 23 through 25, it was another pivot that really, it did get some success, but it didn't move the needle far enough. It didn't move the needle far enough. I prayed last year for God for wisdom to get out of this situation, but to not only get out of it, but to thrive in the future, because I didn't want to repeat this series of mistakes. And he did answer me, but it's weird to have your prayer answered and then to not be successful, and to be like, am I really off? Am I off by that much? And maybe I am, maybe I'm not. Even if this company truly goes to zero and we start over in a hole, like I said, we're going to come back stronger, and we're going to rebuild, and we're going to take all of the knowledge that we learned, and we're going to put Christ at the head, and we'll rebuild. Because what else do you do, right? Like, you don't just quit and die. Well, I guess you can, but I've done the sulking thing, right? I've done the paralyzed thing. I've done the overwhelming stress and weight thing, and it doesn't get you anywhere. And there's this weird freedom where you just kind of have to say, God, take it. It's yours. And at some point, you just have to get punched in the face so many times before you say, okay, God, take it. Like, fine, I'll actually give it to you. You move the mountain. And, I felt like God brought me into a blend of rest while he was working on our company, which was incredibly challenging for me to even compartmentalize or conceptualize, because I've been a workaholic and I worked for so long, and I didn't reach the results that I wanted. And then I let go of the wheel, if you will. And then things started to change, and people started to come into my life, and new structure started to come into my life. Like right before I'm doing this testimony call, I was on a phone call with a gentleman, a big financial player, and I was on their website, and they had, some Bible verse on it. So I started the conversation out talking about God and a little bit of this testimony. And then a follow-up meeting has already been scheduled, and this is a player that is going to have like $250 million of firepower in the next year. And I don't need that much money right now, although I'm excited to work on projects of that stature and size in the future. But it's just an affirmation that if you give it to God, and you really do, and you really trust, things will work out. And we're fighting from a position of victory. And there's a handful of other things that, I felt like I felt like I needed some alignment with God. And this last season was really about focusing my alignment in God, with God, for God. And now, he's the boss, and we work together on projects and in life, and we commune together. And this is a new version of myself that I'm still kind of learning, if I'm honest. I felt like, my transformation was pretty radical. My turnaround is pretty radical. My circumstances have arguably gotten worse. But my faith is no longer in my circumstances. And it used to be, right? It used to be in my pitch decks. It used to be in my pro formas. It used to be in the performance of the properties. And, been there, done that. It doesn't seem to be working for me. And I kind of had to have my identity stripped down, like in the military, where you go there and they beat you up and they break you down and then they build you back up. That's kind of what it felt like for me. It felt like everything had to be stripped away so God could then rebuild back. And I'll tell you what's even crazier is there was a part of the season where, I really got heavy into the Word, and I listened to a lot of sermons. They gave me a lot of strength in the days where I just didn't know what to do. I didn't know, it's scary to tell people you don't know. It really is terrifying, especially when they want real answers, and you've got real weight you've got, real responsibility, real obligations. We have, we've got, 8 digits of money that we're managing, and assets that we're managing, and, over 100 people to take care of. And, the pressure of that it can weigh on you. And for 10 years, for 9 years or so, I was really okay with that. My identity was my company, and I was always all right with that. I enjoyed building the business. I enjoyed not taking vacations because I was building a business. And while I would like a vacation in the near future, maybe for at least like a couple days, I had to recognize that that's not me. Like, I'm not just a real estate guy or investor, or developer, or money raiser, or whatever. We wear a million hats, right? Any small business owner does. And God had to show me that. Like, cool, like this is what you do. Good for you. But like, I have more for you than that. And this calling may be very powerful, and you may need to, fall in line, if you will, with me, so we can then take this calling to the next level, because his ways are better than our ways. I've certainly heard enough testimonies from other people to be able to believe that. And I'm new in my journey, if you will, even though it feels like a very powerful transformation. I'm still new, so I love learning and hearing from other people. But we fight from a position of victory. One of my favorite things, when Christ, at the very end, he said, it is finished. Like, he won against sin, against evil. And when I work and I live in Holyoke and Springfield, I can certainly see the evil in the streets. I can see the addiction that's robbing people of their livelihood. I can see it tearing apart families. I can see it demoralizing people and making them do horrendous things just to maintain a basic level of humanity that they're not even happy with. So when those of us who have faith, and faith is a gift. I mean, like I said, it was my last resort. God was my last resort, and he met me. Your faith is a gift. You don't even, I think you can work to develop it, but at the end of the day, it's a gift from God. And those of us that have been given the gift, I think, at least for me, I feel a somewhat of an obligation to share that with people that I encounter, especially those that are hurting. I think the last thing we lose, a very important young lady said this, the last thing we lose is hope. And if there's anything that Christ in God gives us, is hope for salvation and for something better than what we have here. Everybody knows we have a broken world. Anybody who's experienced the loss of a child, or cancer, or a horrible car wreck. I mean, nobody deserves this. And not that I ever want to minimize anybody's pain. Some people have different painful journeys compared to others, but they all hurt. And we have a human experience. And what's been wild is that God, he's always a million steps ahead of me. Sometimes he'll show me oh, here, I'm 10 steps ahead of you on this one. And he'll let you look at the puzzle. He'll zoom out a little bit, and you can be like, oh, cool. You were there, you were there, you were there. And we just have no idea. And I find that to be absolutely incredible. I like to sit and ponder, on just the size of God. I think a lot of times we put God and even the devil in a box. And when we do that, I think it's really dangerous. I think it's almost like a form of idolatry in its own way. But I've learned that he's in everything, and he knows my thoughts before I say them. I mean, half the time I'll be saying something in my head, a prayer, and then some random stranger will complete a sentence or say some sentence in some other person's conversation, and I'll be like, that fit well And that fit in way too well to what I was just thinking. And it's like, well, if God knows what I was thinking before I thought it, that means he knows what you were thinking before you thought it. And there's no reason that when we're together, he doesn't know exactly what we're going to be saying to each other. And it's those moments in time that kind of make me like, marvel. I love going to church. I want to find a good gospel church. I love how they celebrate the Lord. Bishop Younger, I've been watching him a lot online. He's an awesome leader. So really like Stephen Furtick, Pastor Vlad. Thank you to all of you who have shepherded me over the last 18 months online, as well as Restoration City in Springfield, and then my covenant relationship with my church here, Church of the Valley, with Kevin. It's been really wonderful to find a group that I can invest in and that can nurture me and the other souls. We're all broken. I know that Christianity and religion and all that stuff, it's I guess it's a trigger word for a lot of people. And by and large, a lot of people really kind of, we do sucky things and we're mean and we hurt people a lot. And even when we mean it with good intentions, half the time we say it wrong, we do it wrong. So, for those of you that are, maybe scared to give it another shot, I'd say keep it private. Go into a dark, lock yourself in a room or a closet and pray by yourself and don't tell anybody about it for a while. Let him do the work in you. Let him cook. Well, I imagine, I'm gonna talk more about some of the intimate moments of my life, areas that I've messed up, areas that I've developed. I think I've got a limited experience, but I've got some real world heavy hitting experience that I'm excited to share with people if you'll hear it. So I love you. God bless you all. And I hope you have a wonderful day. Hasta luego. Ciao.